Everyone, thank you so much for having us here as part of UVA's Tech Week. Sheena, Gibson, and I are going to be talking about Peerceptiv, and then Jennifer Sessions, a UVA history professor, will be talking about how she's used it and some of the things that she's found out while she's been using the tool. We'll get started with kind of a big picture overview, and then we'll see some of the screens itself. If you are interested in using Peerceptiv, you will be working with myself or Sheena. So we'll be walking you through the session today. And we both have experience in education and a real passion for helping students use technology in ways that really help them to learn and improve their communication skills and their understanding of the concept. So what Peerceptiv is a peer review or peer learning tool that really allows you to take any assignment and make it collaborative. If you're using the peer assessment portion or function of Peerceptiv, which we'll talk about, it also generates valid and reliable grades. So today we'll cover what Peerceptiv is, talk about how you can use peer learning in synchronous and asynchronous environments, and then talk about some of the updates that we've made for this school year and some of the updates that are coming up in January for kind of the new calendar year. So the first update that we've made, and this one is live and current for everyone. If you've used the team member evaluation tool, if you're interested in using team member evaluation, and this is where if you have groups of students, whether they be in groups for a class or groups for a whole semester, you can have them evaluate each other. This allows you as the instructor to know kind of what's going on behind the scenes of the group, who's been pulling the whole group along and perhaps who hasn't been pulling their fair share. It also gives students the chance to give feedback to their own team members so they can get live, if you're doing it multiple times a semester, kind of check-ins from their group members to know, okay, my group members don't feel like I'm pulling my weight, or wow, my group members have really liked my participation, for example. Previously, this option with Peerceptiv was only available as participation, where either you did it and got 100% or you didn't and got a 0. We've now added the option that you can set it to be graded for students their performance. You can set it so they will receive their mean rating score from their classmates. We are also moving to LTI 1.3 Advantage configuration. This will be available in January for Sakai. I know UVA uses a number of different LMS tools, so if you happen to be a Canvas user, we can get you started with that now. Blackboard will be sooner. Sakai has a little bit more intricacies than some of the other tools, so that will be available in January. And when we have that, you'll be able to use group sync and roster sync, which means the groups will immediately transfer from the roster, I'm sorry, from the LMS into Peerceptiv, and the same with the roster. So that's really nice that you don't need to upload separate lists. The other thing that's coming up in January is a launch of new teacher and student UIs. This will be more user-friendly. And particularly for the teachers, we've really revamped how we're displaying the results to make them more, it's all the same information, but it makes it easier for you to find the results and understand them and use them. So that one of the coolest features, I think, and Sheena will be talking about this later, is that you will actually be able to put articles or other help material into an assignment. And if students score low in a particular area, you can, with a single click, send them that supplementary article for them to read or video for them to watch. Whatever material will help them to better understand the content, you'll be able to do with a single click. And for the students, we're also redesigning their UI, particularly for the results screen, so that they're able to see all of the information in one place at a glance. Before we talk about kind of the specifics of Peerceptiv, I want to talk about a little bit briefly about its history. Peerceptiv was started about 10 years ago at the University of Pittsburgh's Learning Research and Development Center. A psychology professor, Dr. Christian, had large classes of intro psychology And he was realizing that his 100+ students needed more feedback on their writing, and he was not able to provide 100+ students feedback multiple times a year. He also knew of the benefits of doing peer review, where the students are learning by giving the feedback and not just receiving feedback. So he put the two together and was able to take peer review, kind of the old school shuffle papers, pass them out, and turn it into an online program. That's the beginning of Peerceptiv, and that was around 10 years ago. Since then, we've developed a lot of new tools and usages of Peerceptiv, some of that which we'll talk about today. But we've kept the valid and reliable grading. So with Peerceptiv, the grades, the research has shown that the grades consistently align with expert assessment. This frees your time up as the instructor to be able to focus on the students who need more support and get them the support that they need. The grades are reliable because we build in a number of ways to hold students accountable. Part of it is that the students are graded on their quality of reviews, both on the accuracy of their ratings and how helpful their feedback is. We also have built in some instructor accountability, so instructors can be involved in the grading and rating process as well. And these things do keep students accountable, so they're doing the work and they're doing it well. And then it generates a lot of analytics so that you can really see how your class is doing at a very granular level according to the rubric that you yourself set up. All of this is for the peer assessment tool that we have, where students upload an electronic file, whether that's writing, video presentations, podcasts, whatever the electronic file is. Students will go in and rate it according to the rubric that you set up, and that's what generates the grades. We also have team member evaluation, as I was talking about a moment ago, and team member evaluation is where students rate their group members. It's a little different because they're not turning in any product, they're just rating their group members. Everything is anonymous, and if it's a writing assignment or some other assignment where there's no visual or audio element, it's all double blind. If it's a presentation, the reviewers are anonymous, but of course, you know who's giving the presentation, for example. The research findings have shown that learning improves most by providing feedback to peers. One of the nice features of Peerceptiv is that because we have the step of keeping reviewers accountable by rating how helpful the comments they give are, it really does, if approached well by the students, it really does keep students accountable. And I'm in the data all the time and see where students who just say, oh, it's great, get dinged because those comments are right next to a student who gave really well thought out comments, and those are the ones that are helpful. The research has also shown that assessment by multiple peers is as valid and reliable as assessment by a single expert when students are properly motivated. So again, this allows you to free up your time from grading to really focusing on the students who need the extra support. I'm going to turn it over to Sheena. She's going to walk you through the student assignment workflow. Again, this is for kind of the peer assessment assignments where students upload products. Before we get there though, are there any questions?
Okay.
All right.
Well, feel free to put questions in the chat and we'll certainly get to them later. So in the typical Peerceptiv assignment workflow, so again, this is our standard assignment, there are three main phases. There's the submission phase, the review phase, and the feedback phase. During the submission phase, students upload their work. So as Megan mentioned, this can be a document, this could be a video presentation, this could be a website URL. So anything that is digital can be reviewed in Peerceptiv. And Peerceptiv takes care of the automated document distribution. So you don't need to worry about who's reviewing who or how many reviews each student got. Peerceptiv handles all of that for you. So students are moving through the process without you having to do anything. And then the reviewing phase, as Megan mentioned, is completely anonymous. So students won't know who they're reviewing or who's reviewing them, as long as, like she said, it's not a video presentation or as long as they don't put their names on their work. And that anonymity leads to bias-free peer evaluation. So we've found that students feel much more comfortable giving honest, constructive feedback when they're in an anonymous environment. So I'm sure if you've done peer review in class, you know that often students will say, oh, it's great, and they'll kind of leave off the more constructive criticism. In a more anonymous environment, students feel more comfortable being honest. But we do hold students accountable for what they do say in their comments through the feedback stage. So after the review phase, students move into the feedback phase, and this is where students are able to read the reviews their work received and comment back to their reviewers. So that's also holding the reviewers accountable for giving that good constructive feedback. And then students in the feedback phase are rating those comments on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the least helpful, 5 being the most helpful. And the longer, more constructive, thoughtful comments are getting the higher ratings in the feedback phase. So at the end of an assignment, Peerceptiv is generating grades, and they're not just getting grades for their submission, they're getting grades for their submission, plus the accuracy of their reviewing, and that's calculated through our algorithm, and through the helpfulness of their reviewing. And as Megan mentioned, those grades have been shown to be as valid and reliable as instructor grades, specifically when it's generated by multiple peers. So you want to have multiple data points to be able to create a more robust grading system. And then I do want to talk about, we have 2 different workflows in Peerceptiv. We have our synchronous assignment workflow and our asynchronous workflow. And when we say synchronous and asynchronous, our definitions are a little bit different than the way they're used nowadays since the pandemic. So when we say synchronous, we just mean that there are common deadlines. We don't mean that they're working through it together in class. So in a synchronous assignment workflow, everyone needs to submit by, let's say, Tuesday at midnight, and then everyone moves to the reviewing phase, and everyone needs to review by maybe Friday at midnight, and then everyone needs to do their feedback by, let's say, Sunday at midnight. So there are those common deadlines. Everyone's moving through the process at the same relative time. Our asynchronous workflow, what that means is that students are able to submit, and then if other people have already submitted, they're able to review immediately. And then if they get a review, they're able to give feedback immediately. And then they might be able to, go back and give another review. So it's a much more fluid process. Students are moving through it at whatever time they want. And there's no common deadlines. There might be a common deadline at the end of the semester. So let's say, students are able to do this process throughout the whole semester, and then they need to be done with it by, maybe December 20th or something. And that's the final cutoff for being able to move through the assignment. With our asynchronous workflow, we recommend that being used in classes of 100 or more, because there needs to be a high volume to move students through that process quickly and easily. Our asynchronous workflow also supports competency-based assessments, or assignments. So as long as they do all of the tasks required of them, then they immediately get a submission grade. So with our synchronous workflow, students are getting graded on reviewing. With our asynchronous workflow, they're just receiving a grade for their submission. So some examples of assignment types that we see in Peerceptiv, we see a lot of writing across the disciplines. So a lot of science writing, especially in large science courses, lab reports specifically as well. And then Peerceptiv is actually great for facilitating group projects. So if you're interested in doing group projects, Peerceptiv can actually take the groups from your LMS and import them in, as long as you're getting set up on 1.3 Advantage, as Megan mentioned, or you can set up the groups just within Peerceptiv yourself. That's fine. One person within the group will submit, and then everyone in the group has to do reviews. So it's a nice way for group members to review their peers without you having to take a whole 1 or 2 class periods to have everyone watch everyone else's submissions. So group projects, that's a really nice way to do it in Peerceptiv. Same with presentations, video debates. We've also seen Peerceptiv used for online portfolios, coding, infographics, podcasts, and reading reflections. So again, in the reviewing phase, our distribution algorithms ensure everyone gets reviewed quickly. All peer reviewing activity is either anonymous or double blind. And we're fully integrated with Collab. So there's a single sign-on for students and teachers. Students just need to go into Collab, click the Peerceptiv assignment, and they're sent right to Peerceptiv. They don't need to sign into Peerceptiv separately if you're integrated with Collab. Same if you're integrated with Canvas or Blackboard or another LMS. And then Peerceptiv sends the grades back to the LMS. We're an IMS Global Affiliate member. Megan talked about LTI 1.3 Advantage is coming soon, and same with roster and group sync coming along with that. So this is an example of what the reviewing screen might look like in Peerceptiv. On one side, you have the document or the file, whatever it is, appears in the iframe. And then on the other side, what we're seeing an example of here is a commenting prompt. And our commenting prompts are part of the rubric, and they generate qualitative comments. So this is completely up to you. You can generate these qualitative comments. We also have some sample rubrics that you can import in, and you can use them, or you can just use them for inspiration. So this is generating that qualitative feedback, and new research coming out is showing that the longer and the more detailed the comments, the greater the learning is on the part of the student who's giving that comment. So that's pretty exciting to see. And this is an example of a quantitative rating prompt. So the rubric is set up with qualitative review and quantitative review. And here students are choosing a number on a scale of, in this case, 1 to 7. You could set it up 1 to 4. You could set it up 1 to 10. That's up to you based on your rubric and how you like to set it up. This is just an example of what it might look like if there was a video project. You could see the video on the side, and then we have another commenting prompt on the right. Okay, so this is an example of what the feedback screen is going to look like in our new UI that's coming in 2022. So we wanted to kind of give you a sneak preview of some of those screens that are coming in 2022. Students, we have a feedback screen now. It's just not as pretty as this one, but students will see the comments, and then they're able to rate that comment on a scale of 1 to 5, from lowest to highest on how helpful that comment was for them. And then this next screen is another example of another sneak preview of our new UI coming in 2022. This is going to be the student results screen. So students will see their overall grade broken up into 3 pieces: their submission grade, their reviewing grade, and their task grade. And we'll talk more about that in a minute, how the grades break down in Peerceptiv. Underneath that, you can see rubric scores. So they'll be able to see exactly how they score on each section of the rubric. And they can do that now in Peerceptiv, but this is just a little bit nicer. If they click the more button with the arrow, they'll be able to see the rating level description. So they'll know exactly where they fell on the rubric. On the right side, this is the resources tab. This is what Megan was mentioning earlier, that this is a new feature that will be coming. You can preload resources into the system, and anyone who scores low in a certain area of the rubric will be automatically sent the resources that align with that section of the rubric. So if this student scored low in logic of argument, the resources essentially would match to logic of argument. It would automatically populate for them, creating a more individualized learning platform. And then underneath that, we have the peer comments. They'll be able to see all of the comments they received. If they click see full dialogue, they'll actually see the comments that they gave back to their reviewers. So it'll be almost like a chat screen when you're looking at your phone. They'll be able to see the chat bubbles of the comments they gave and then the comments that they received. So this is we're going to talk a little bit more about how the grading works in Peerceptiv. So again, Peerceptiv generates 3 grades: a submission grade, which is how students scored on their rubric based on how their peers rated them. Then a reviewing grade, which is made up of their accuracy score based on the algorithm and their helpfulness score, so how students rated how helpful their comments were. And then finally, a task grade. And the task grade is, did they complete all of the tasks of the assignment? So in Peerceptiv, we consider the peer assessment process to be part of the learning process. So we hold students accountable for every step of the assessment, learning process. So we want to make sure that we're building in those checks so that students know they're not just handing something in and getting a grade for it. The assessment is actually where they're doing their learning. So we're holding them accountable for their accuracy of their reviewing and whether or not they completed all of the tasks of the assignment. In our default assignments, the submission grade counts for 40% of the overall grade, the reviewing grade counts for 40% of the overall grade, and the task grade counts for 20% of the overall grade, but that's completely customizable according to your preference. So you could say, you know, I really want the focus to be on the submission, so I'm going to put 60% of the weight on submission. Or you could say, I don't really care how their peers score them. I just want to know that they're reviewing and that they're giving good comments. I'm going to put 80% of the grade on reviewing. So you're able to weight how you want that scoring to happen. So the grading algorithms adjust peer scoring to be as accurate as an instructor. Students with a higher reviewing accuracy scores actually have a greater effect or weight on the submission scores. So if Megan and I are both reviewing a peer and Megan is much more accurate than I am, her scores are going to count more toward that peer's ultimate grade than mine would. So the Peerceptiv algorithm is taking that into account. And instructor reviews are considered to be 100% accurate, and they'll affect the accuracy scores and weights of the other students who also review the same document that the instructor does. So, you know, if Jennifer Sessions comes in and she scores that same document and her scores are different than Megan's, then, you know, Megan's scores are going to count less because her scores are considered to be 100% accurate. So the algorithm is adjusting for all of that. Okay, so I'm gonna stop there, pass it back to Megan, but do we have any questions before we move on? Let's see, in the chat, we see late assignments were an issue for me in a graduate science writing class last year. This leads to more work for me because I had to coordinate makeup reviews. Beyond encouraging students to get things in on time, what else can be done to better accommodate late submissions? So Peerceptiv does allow for late submissions up until 24 hours before the reviewing deadline. So as I mentioned with the deadlines, we have a submission deadline and then a reviewing deadline. If students are late on the submission deadline, that's fine. Peerceptiv will accept it up until 24 hours before the reviewing deadline. So what I might recommend is making that reviewing time period a little bit longer. So giving students maybe, you know, depending how long the assignment is, you could go up to, you know, 4 or 5 days, even up to a week for that reviewing phase. And that's going to give those late submitters more time to trickle in. It also gives the reviewers more time to really be thoughtful with their reviews. And then Jennifer Sessions says, in my experience, students are far less likely to miss Peerceptiv deadlines than my deadlines. We also send out a lot of email notifications. We send email notifications, you know, when there's a new task, and then 24 hours before the deadline for each of the deadlines. So hopefully that helps as well. Any other questions before we move on? And we're going to be doing questions again at the end. So if there isn't, we'll move on. Okay.
All right. So Sheena just went over the type of assessments that you can use in Peerceptiv for products when students submit anything that they've done. And I will say that UVA last year, it was the first year that Peerceptiv was available on a wide basis at UVA. And we saw just a real variety of uses. It was fun to work with some of you and other instructors at UVA. We had some instructors who used Peerceptiv just for qualitative feedback. So there were no ratings. The instructor just wanted to use it to facilitate comments so that students could get a chance to see other groups' products and give them helpful feedback. Then you had times where it was used more in a traditional sense, and times that students were using it even in an asynchronous format where students could upload their own document or their own product, review their peers, and get feedback, you know, overnight in some cases, if there are lots of students doing the assignment. So we're excited to be working at UVA again and just seeing the wide variety of ways that peer learning can enhance what you're already doing in your curriculum. Another product that we offer is team member evaluation, and we've talked about it a little bit. This is a copy of what the screen looks like for the students when they're in a group. So they see their group members and they rate them on a scale from 1 to 5. We have a preset rubric, so you can use our preset rubric or you can use your own categories. Most of Peerceptiv rubrics offer you a wide variety for customization. Team member evaluation is a little bit more limited because you do have to go work within that scale of 1 to 5, but usually that's enough for students, giving them some options in how they rate their peers without too many options that they get stuck. And usually students can complete team member evaluation assignments in 5 minutes or 10 minutes at most. They're ranking their students, and we have it laid out so the names are on top of each other so they can really think about, okay, who really participated in this group assignment, who didn't participate as much, and give them the appropriate score. We also have commenting prompts so they can give comments. And again, we see this used in a number of different ways. In most cases, the instructors want the students to see the ratings and the comments. In some cases, the instructors use it to kind of get a finger on the pulse for themselves and may or may not share the information. When students do see it, know that all of the information is anonymous. So they know that one of their group members gave them the comment, but they don't know which one. And for the ratings, they just see the overall score that they received. So this particular student would probably see, I don't know, a 3.2 or 3.3, whatever the average is of the 2 4s, a 3 and a 2 that the student received. Again, they're not seeing the specifics. You as the instructor, though, you have a full picture to know all of that information. And this is what it looks like from the instructor side, and we wanted to highlight some of the different updates. You can see the rubric focuses on, and this is the pre-built one, you can of course customize it, preparation, engagement, attendance, cooperation, overall contribution, things like that. You can decide if you want students to be required to leave comments. You can also decide if you want the average score to be their performance within the group or their participation. And again, you can download all of the detailed evaluation data. We actually were just talking with an instructor who used team member evaluation last year, and she was saying how she did a couple of different check-ins with groups, and if she found out that group members were not carrying their full weight through these evaluations, she actually pulled those students out, kind of pulled the slackers out and put them in their own group, and then they were forced to carry a little bit more of the weight by the end of the semester. So there's a variety of different ways to use these assignments. They're quick and easy, and they can let you have insight into a group that you might not otherwise. Last, we wanted to end before Jennifer shares her experience by showing you some of the analytics that Peerceptiv generates. This is one of the strengths of Peerceptiv over some of the other different peer review tools, especially like the built-in ones in Canvas or Blackboard, that really gives you a lot of analytics so that you can know exactly where your students are, how they're doing, and how the class is as a whole. Just like the student results screen, this is kind of a sneak peek at the January teacher update. All of the information that's here is currently in the tool. It just doesn't look as pretty and may not be as easy to find at a glance. The top part shows you how the class did on the rubric. So this is nice because you can see not just the student level, but you can know, okay, the class doesn't seem to be doing well in the logic of argument area on this particular rubric. Let's go back, let's spend 10 or 15 more minutes in class working on it. Maybe I need to tighten the rubric a little bit. Maybe they just were confused by the rubric. But here's an area where clearly the class as a whole needs some extra support. And then the individual scores are broken down by rubric item. So this lets you go in and focus in on those specific students who need additional support if it's just 1 or 2 students and not the class as a whole. Then we show you the breakdown of grades so that you have a sense of where your students are. and the individual assignment grades again, so you can know exactly how students are doing, see the submissions, see the reviews, see the task scores. The peer assessment assignments where they're reviewing each other's products, they are highly, highly customizable. So Sheena talked about some of the ways that you can customize the grading. There are many other ways. We see some instructors who are grading each assignment right alongside the students, and then some instructors in 200, 300 plus person classes where they're allowing the Peerceptiv algorithm to generate most of the grades, and they may only be involved in grading 10 to 15 or a certain percentage, giving them some control over the grading process, but not requiring them to do the grading of 250 assignments multiple times a semester. All right. We also have a lot of support for getting new instructors on board. First, I will say the UVA support team has been very, very helpful in working with us. So we know that they know how to get things set up, and they know that we can help instructors when they need it. So thank you all. We have a lot of rubric support because in peer review, it really comes down to the strength of your rubric in terms of, is it assessing what you want the students to be assessing, and do the students understand it? So we have some pre-built rubrics if they match your assignments, or you can look at them for ideas. We also have a crowdsourced rubric library that can give you some ideas if you're, say, a biology teacher and you want to see some other examples of biology rubrics. We can work with you to share rubrics within departments if an entire department wants to use the same team member evaluation rubric or the same biology lab rubric, for example. And we offer one-to-one rubric design consultations via Zoom or email with instructors, whichever you prefer. We also have a knowledge base with a lot of information. We have student-facing videos and articles. We actually just updated our student videos over the summer. So if you've used Peerceptiv before, we now have new videos. We also added some instructor videos too that kind of walk you through, this is what you do now. You can stop the video, do it. This is what you do now, stop the video and do it. So you're getting that extra support. For instructors, we have weekly office hours that are available to any instructor from 2 to 4 on Mondays through Thursdays. And we offer student email support. So if students have problems, most common student problem is logging in, we're able to help them. Sometimes students have questions about grades, and we can work with you to make sure that those questions are answered. So we do have a lot of support there, so you're not left kind of using a new tech tool without any resources. Before we turn it over to Jennifer to share her experience using Peerceptiv, are there any questions about anything we've covered really?
We just got another one in chat. It says, for my class, students will stay in consistent peer eval groups across the semester. Is there an easier way to do this other than the weekly manual entry by the instructor that was recommended previously?
Yeah, so if your groups are staying if your students are staying in the same groups, there's actually a way that you can just copy the groups over from one assignment to the next, to the next, to the next, like that, so that they can always be in the same group. Currently, you need to copy the assignment in, first in Colab and then in Peerceptiv. For Colab, probably January, you'll be, for the January or spring term courses, we should have it set up with Colab that you can copy an entire course. So you could copy it with Peerceptiv assignments. If you're interested in that for Canvas, we can get you started with that immediately, and Blackboard will be coming a little bit sooner as well.
Did that answer your question, Jenny? Yes, okay, great.
All right, then Jennifer, if you don't mind sharing your experience. And I can, do you want me to stop the share?
It doesn't matter. I had a couple of things that I was going to show if
Yep,
just
I'll
as
stop the share.
examples. If I have the power to share my screen. Okay, so not a PowerPoint. I was actually just going to show people like my rubrics and kind of the way I built this into assignments. But so I guess I should start by saying, like, I am highly skeptical of the whole educational technology industry. I think it is largely a waste of time driven by tech people, not teachers. And Peerceptiv is like the one exception to this. I've been using Peerceptiv. I learned it at my previous institution, which actually I think worked on the beta version of it many years ago, and have been very happy to be able to continue to use it at UVA. In teaching history classes and kind of interdisciplinary humanities and social science classes at pretty much every level, from the gen ed undergraduate introductory survey course, 250 students in an introduction to modern European history, to graduate seminars with PhD students. And I had used it for the kind of peer evaluation of writing process. So I haven't used the team peer evaluation system. I'm going to try evaluating digital humanities projects, I think this fall for the first time. But mostly I've done it with kind of traditional papers so far. And so I guess without going into too much detail, I just wanted to kind of, I think, highlight some of the things that I have found really valuable about Peerceptiv. And I guess I will start by thanking some people, because it is also kind of a peer support tool for the instructor side. Also, I could not have done any of this and gotten it working over the last couple of years without Jitna Feerdewek in the Learning Design and Technology Office in ANS, or Megan, as you may have learned, Colab doesn't play nicely with many things, including Peerceptiv so far. So getting it up and running has been a bit of a challenge over the last couple of years. So Jitna and Megan really kind of made that possible. But I think that the thing that I really have, I think, found most valuable about Peerceptiv is the emphasis that it puts on process for writers and process for readers and peer evaluators. And, I'm not at all surprised to learn that the research is showing how impactful the reviewing process is for students who participate in this process, because it really is, I think the papers that students turn in get much better. They complete the drafts. The drafts are not the half-assed drafts that I used to get from face-to-face peer review. They're complete drafts. So the students actually go through the drafting and revision process fully, which they didn't always with other kinds of peer review that I've done before. But I think that they actually learn an enormous amount from reading other people's drafts. I have them do 3 and 3. Each writer gets 3 readers, and each reviewer reads 3 drafts from their classmates. And I think that seeing the range of what's possible is really valuable for the reviewers. They 3 is usually enough that they get, a range of quality of drafts and can kind of begin to see where their own writing compares, and to see, sort of how the things that they're seeing in their classmates' writing might be reflected in their own writing. They see what works, what doesn't. They see things that they can try that they never tried before. And they learn to begin to think and talk about writing in an explicit and purposeful way. And this is where I think the guided peer review is really, really valuable. So I thought I'd start by just showing, if I can get the right document up here, kind of the specificity of the rubrics, which I have found kind of very, very useful for getting students to think concretely about what they're looking for as a reviewer. Not just, do I like this or do I not? Is it well organized or is it not? But what does actually being well organized mean? At least according to this instructor. So let me see if I can get this. Yeah, I think this is the correct file. So I don't know what you're seeing. Hopefully you are seeing something that starts our second essay assignment, asks you, okay, awesome. So this is the rubric for, it was actually the paper my students were about to start writing when the pandemic hit in March of 2019. So they didn't actually write this paper, but I think that the thing will kind of give you a sense of the sort of specificity that I've kind of learned thanks to collaborating with specialists in the teaching of writing into the rubrics themselves. So, you know, it's not just asking sort of a fill in the blank, you know, does the author provide sufficient evidence to support their argument? Because it turns out that at least in history, you know, not a lot of students actually know what that means. And so to be able to spell out, you know, is all of the evidence appropriate to the analysis and directly related to the argument? Does every point have suitable evidence? You know, or is it that the evidence is, you know, appropriate, but it isn't necessarily directly related, you know, and some of it, you know, some of the points don't have evidence. You know, it's mostly appropriate, but doesn't really support the argument. And so being able to spell it out this way gives the reviewers a sense of what to look for and gives them a much more concrete foundation for providing constructive feedback, because they can look at the rubric and say, oh, so yes, actually, you know, yeah, all the examples here are relevant to the topic, but they don't always relate to the argument that you're trying to make. And so here's where you might be able to do that. So I have found this very, you know, I use the combination of quantitative and qualitative feedback where students, you know, choose have a multiple choice thing in the rubric, and then also have to provide feedback about and suggestions about where to improve. And I found that this kind of guided process is really, really helpful at the individual assignment level, and then also over the course of a semester to be able to kind of scaffold sort of increasingly complex writing tasks as well. So early rubrics in the intro course might be really about, like, you know, has the person answered the question, and, you know, are the examples appropriate? And then, you know, you can sort of add on dimensions as the semester goes on and the students get more practice. So that's one of the things that I've really, really liked about it. It puts the emphasis on the process. It gives student writers an audience who isn't me. So their first readers are not the instructor. And so I think that they think less about kind of writing to what they think I want to hear, and more sort of authentically writing the thing that they care about. And the feedback that they get initially is not from me or their TA, but from their peers, who take the process a lot more seriously when they're writing for each other than when they were writing just for me and the TA. So I think that's really, I think for me, the most important thing is that emphasis on process, where students not only produce better individual papers, but I think they actually learn a lot better how to read critically and to develop the skill of kind of self-editing, so that they can apply the things that they have learned from reading other people's work to their own work further down the road. And the kind of the grading algorithm that Megan described kind of does sort of builds this in. And I have had, you know, some concern from students about being graded by other students rather than the instructor, which, you know, sometimes I just tell them, like, well, tough, that's the way it is. But I also do, I have not yet used Peerceptiv as the only source of a grade. So I have used it for the kind of drafting and revising process, and then the final essays are graded either by me or me and my TAs. Yes, so I like Peerceptiv a lot. I will say that the logistics are a little bit more complicated, and that was the other thing that I'd want to say to anybody who's thinking about using Peerceptiv, is that it, unlike, you know, we're just going to spend a class period reading drafts and giving feedback, it is a process that takes, kind of the standard process I've developed, takes like 2.5 weeks. And so I do have to build that into the syllabus. So I'll just show you, and to kind of avoid, you know, sort of confusion, I have emphasized kind of the timeline for Peerceptiv in the syllabus, but then also in assignments, when I hand out assignments, that, you know, sort of, I give students the, you know, the topic and the question, but then also build the deadlines into the assignment. And you can see how long, you know, this is for a short essay and an intro level gen ed course. You know, submit drafts, a week to do reviews, a week to do revisions, and then a couple of days to do the back evaluations of the feedback that students received on their drafts from their peer reviewers. And so there are some trade-offs in terms of, you know, kind of other, I scale back the other homework during that period when they're working on these essays. And kind of, you know, paper writing takes a bigger chunk of the semester than it did when they were just writing a paper or turning it in, even if there was a draft process there. So kind of the organizing and the scheduling of it is something, you know, that I have learned I really have to pay attention to. The tech stuff, it sounds like it's going to get better, hopefully. The interface is not super intuitive, so you know, I really have leaned very heavily on you know, Yitna and Megan, who both were very, very helpful, and you know, we've been able to get it working, but kind of the learning curve there was pretty steep, and so calling in help early on was really important there. And then I guess the last kind of logistical piece of it is, you know, as I think you know, both Megan and Sheena mentioned, the rubric is kind of the thing that will make or break the whole process. And so I also have gotten a lot of help over the years from colleagues in sort of the teaching and learning of writing, and figuring out how to set up rubrics that do what I want them to do, as sort of concretely and specifically as I can, because the explicitness of the rubric is really seems to be really important for students. So all three of those, kind of the rubric design, the technology piece, and the scheduling piece, all require some planning in advance. So this is something that now is kind of one of the building blocks of course design from the very beginning. But I think it's really worth it. It's, you know, it's a little bit technologically unwieldy. It takes some time, but I think it's absolutely been really valuable tool for my students.
Thank you. Are there any questions just for Jennifer? Because we're happy to answer things, but we aren't at UVA. And I will second that Yitna in particular has been very, very helpful with getting Peerceptiv integrated with Colab and making sure that those directions and instructions are available to everyone. So he's not here today, but he's done a lot of work with that. I'm going to share my screen again. Last year was the first year that Peerceptiv was used at UVA. but it was really used in a number of departments: religion, statistics, creative writing, biology, astronomy, history. What we find in general is that Peerceptiv is best with, like Jennifer was saying, kind of the critical thinking type issues that you want students to be thinking about, not just did they dot all their I's, did they use a comma everywhere they needed to, but the big picture things. Do they know how to structure an argument? Do they know how to present support? Do they know what support is relevant? Those kinds of things at the argument level are much better. And then there's really kind of the sky's the limit in terms of assignment types, as long as it can be uploaded. Last year we saw statistical projects that were spreadsheets long, even a history project. The instructor had students before each test basically upload their notes. So they would kind of sketch out their notes for the chapter or the chapters that the test was on, and then students would peer review that. It was really creative. The rubric not just asked about content that was represented, but also kind of the wow factor, because they were doing it in visual form. So really the sky's the limit, and we're happy to work with you to figure out the best way to take whatever assignments you're currently doing and put them into Peerceptiv. As Jennifer said, it does take a little bit more upfront work. So we're very happy to be working with you now before the semester's underway. We're happy to work with you in 3 weeks. But the more that if you're thinking about using Peerceptiv, the more that you can do upfront will save you when the semester is going on and you have lots of other demands on your time. If you do have any questions, please contact us at support@peerceptiv.com. We're very happy to help. Check out the knowledge base, and the UVA page also has information about using Peerceptiv. Particularly if you're interested in using Peerceptiv with Colab, the UVA page has the directions for getting started with Peerceptiv in Colab. So you'll want to check out that first, and then head to the knowledge base for all the specific Peerceptiv stuff. I think there's a question, and I do want to open it up for questions. So Sheena, is that a question in the chat?
It's not a question, but Dr. Fountain wanted to say that he's the director of writing across the curriculum at UVA, and he's happy to assist anyone with designing their assignments, evaluation criteria, or rubrics. He listed his email in the chat. So thank you, Dr. Fountain, for providing assistance. If anyone is interested in reaching out to him, he put his email in the chat. So thank you so much.
And are there any questions?
Maybe
Well,
I'll just add that I have used this in kind of disrupted semester so far at UVA, but my general experience is that students have really appreciated Peerceptiv once they wrap their minds around the logistics of it. That for students also, it has been a fairly new tool. I think I may have been the first person at UVA to use Peerceptiv. So my students, no one had seen it or even heard about it before. Hopefully that will change as more people start to adopt it. But the hiccups of getting started were I think students found very worthwhile in the end. And so the feedback that I got from students about using Peerceptiv, the only sort of substantive objections really had to do with the scheduling piece for students who found the deadlines constraining. But otherwise, I think my general sense so far is that they have, when they come to the end of a semester, having gone through the Peerceptiv process a couple of times, that they really have felt like they learned something from it and took away skills that were useful beyond the kind of beyond the specifics of the course.
And Jenny commented in the chat something similar, that she found some pushback from grad students because they defaulted to wanting the specific comments on Google Doc-like formats. But after a bit of time, they got used to it. We've found that, yeah, Peerceptiv is not as useful for that kind of granular editing. And that's not really what Peerceptiv is going for. We don't want it to become a copy editing tool. We want them to be looking at the big picture with their writing and those critical thinking pieces. Great.
And I think that's one of the interesting things for beginning writers, you know, who are in the intro courses, that that it's actually a really useful gateway to that kind of higher order thinking about writing as more than copy editing, and it helps to give them tools to kind of maybe graduate from thinking about writing as more than the 5-paragraph essay that so many of them have had drilled into them by their K-12 experience.
Well, thank you so much for attending and for setting it up. And well, actually, I was about to say that we'll send out the recording, but Krista, you and your department have all the recordings, so I'm sure we'll be in touch, but please do reach out to us with any questions. If you're interested in using Peerceptiv this semester, or just kind of putting in your back pocket and thinking about a tool for the future, we're happy to work with you at any point.
Okay, thanks everyone.